The world has been stunned by an explosive statement coming out of West Africa. Ibrahim Traoré, the leader of Burkina Faso, has delivered a bold, fiery ultimatum that is shaking diplomatic channels across continents. In a televised address, broadcast across the continent and quickly circulated globally via social media, Traoré declared with conviction, greater than Israel, you have 48 hours to end the massacres in Palestine. If your attacks and occupations do not cease, then on the third day's morning, Burkina Faso will respond with nuclear fire. The world stood still. Some laughed, some were horrified, and others, particularly in the global south, erupted in applause. But one thing was clear. No one expected this from a leader of a landlocked nation, one often marginalized in global power politics. Let's unpack what just happened. Ibrahim Traoré, since taking power in 2022 at just 34 years old, has grown. From a transitional military leader to a symbol of Pan-African resistance and defiance. In recent months, his speeches have taken a sharper tone, anti-colonial, unapologetic, and direct, but this declaration went beyond rhetoric. Nuclear fire? Immediately, questions began swirling. Does Burkina Faso even have nuclear weapons? If not, is Traoré bluffing? Or, more chillingly, does he have silent allies with such capabilities? Some analysts suggest this wasn't a threat in the traditional sense, but a calculated psychological move, a geopolitical chess play aimed at drawing attention, applying pressure, and igniting broader African solidarity with Palestine. Others, however, see deeper layers, in the hours. Following the address, regional African leaders responded in varied tones. Mali and Niger issued joint statements backing Traoré's moral stance against violence in Gaza, but carefully distanced themselves from any mention of nuclear retaliation. Algeria, long supportive of Palestinian statehood, called an emergency. Closed-door summit of sympathetic African and Middle Eastern nations. Rumors began swirling. Is there a secret weapons pact between African nations now outside Western military influence? Meanwhile, Western capitals went into overdrive. The United States condemned the speech as irresponsible rhetoric, while France's foreign ministry called it a dangerous provocation. But on the streets of Ouagadougou, Bamako, and even in parts of Gaza, Traoré was being hailed as a voice that dared to say what many in the global South feel, that enough is enough. On social media, the hashtag Africa stands with Palestine trended globally within hours. Traoré's face was photoshopped next to nuclear mushroom clouds by both supporters and critics. Memes exploded. Analysts scrambled. Diplomats panicked. But let's step back. Is this just a viral speech? Or does it signal a tectonic shift in world politics, the global south no longer asking for justice, but demanding it with threats? In the following 24 hours, Israel remained silent officially but reportedly went into military alert mode. The Israeli Air Force increased patrols. The Iron Dome system's readiness was raised. Mossad, Israel's intelligence agency, reportedly opened an emergency dossier titled Traoré Protocol. Meanwhile, Burkina Faso's army released a vague statement on social media. Our sovereignty is complete. Our capabilities are underestimated, but our will is absolute. Could this be bravado, misinformation, psychological warfare? Or could Traoré be echoing a much older strategy of bluffing strength to gain leverage? Some experts recalled how North Korea, despite severe sanctions, used similar bluffs and ambiguous capabilities to become a nuclear power. And here's where the story becomes even more complex. Russian and Chinese state media ran sympathetic coverage of Traoré's speech. Questioning Western hypocrisy and past silence on Gaza, RT published a headline, "African Lion Roars for Palestine." China's Global Times suggested that global power may be shifting from military might to moral leadership. While Washington bristled, Moscow and Beijing watched. Even Latin American leaders from Venezuela to Bolivia nodded in vague support. Some hinted that Traoré may be the beginning of a broader anti-imperialist wave united by outrage over Gaza and fueled by long-standing resentment toward Western dominance. But what about the nukes? As of now, no independent verification exists confirming Burkina Faso has access to nuclear arms. The country is not listed among nuclear-capable nations, and its infrastructure does not suggest nuclear capabilities. However, theories exploded. Online. One theory claims that nuclear weapons from Libya's dismantled arsenal under Gaddafi were hidden and transferred to neighboring states. Another argues that Russia may have quietly transferred nuclear warheads in exchange for mining rights and regional military footholds. Still, no evidence confirms these theories. So what happens now? The countdown is on. If Traoré was serious, then by the third day's morning, something big is expected. But many believe the speech was symbolic, a way to grab attention, shift the global narrative, and force nations to confront their own silence. If that was the goal, it worked. Global newspapers now carry Traoré's name. The Palestinian issue, which had faded from headlines in many countries, is front and center. African youth, long feeling disconnected from global policy, are engaged and mobilized. For Traoré, this could be a high-stakes gamble. If nothing follows, critics may call him a bluffer. But if Israel halts its operations under global pressure, even partially, he will be hailed as a symbol of Global South resistance. Either way, history is being written. A young African leader from one of the world's poorest countries dared to threaten one of the world's most militarized and backed nations. And now, the world is watching. Will diplomacy prevail? Will this spark broader confrontation? Or has Traoré simply exposed how much power even a bold voice can wield in a tired and divided world? The clock is ticking. We'll be watching every second. It is now the evening of the second day, the moment Ibrahim Traoré set as the ultimatum for Israel to cease its operations in Palestine has nearly arrived. The world is tense. News anchors speak with hushed voices. Military analysts appear hourly on global networks. Social media is a war zone of theories, warnings, memes, and prayers. But something unexpected happened today. Burkina Faso state television aired a second emergency message from President Ibrahim Traoré. Standing in military fatigues, flanked by members of the junta and senior commanders, Traoré appeared composed, his eyes fixed on the camera. Greater than to the world, I say this clearly. We are not bluffing. We are not powerless. And we are not alone. The speech was shorter than his previous address, but it sent an even bigger shockwave, not because of what he said, but because of what came after. Following the speech, the national broadcaster displayed footage of what appeared to be a missile being loaded into a large launcher draped in camouflage netting in a remote desert region. Coordinates were blurred. No further explanation was given. Moments later, another surprise came. Iran released a statement declaring unwavering support for nations who stand against Zionist aggression. While no direct reference to Traoré was made, the timing was suspicious. Then came the real shocker. A leaked document, allegedly from a Russian military intelligence channel, suggested that a special technical agreement had been made between Moscow and Ouagadougou 6 months earlier, offering strategic deterrence packages in exchange for exclusive access to uranium and rare earth mining zones in Burkina Faso. Could this mean Russia supplied some form of missile technology or nuclear device? Western intelligence agencies are now on high alert. The CIA, Mossad, MI6, all reportedly rerouting assets to gather intel on Burkina Faso's military movements. Meanwhile, the African Union called an emergency meeting, their first unscheduled summit in years. While some leaders condemned the escalation, a growing bloc led by Mali, Guinea, and Niger expressed solidarity with Burkina Faso's stance against genocide in Palestine. In the midst of all this, something else happened that no one expected. Mass protests erupted across European cities, London, Paris, Berlin, and Madrid, not in fear of Traore's words, but in support of his demand. Tens of thousands of people, largely young and diverse, carried signs reading, "Stop the Gaza killings. Traore speaks for us," and "Justice before peace." For many around the world, the focus is no longer on whether Burkina Faso has nuclear weapons. It's on why it took a leader from one of the poorest countries on earth to say what others wouldn't. Meanwhile, inside Israel, things are shifting fast. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reportedly held an emergency war cabinet session. Intelligence reports suggest he has taken Traore's threat more seriously than the public knows. Yet, operations in Gaza continued into the night, airstrikes, artillery shelling, and urban combat still tearing through neighborhoods. And now, the question echoes across every screen, every embassy, every capital. Will Traore do it? Or will he stand down at the last moment, having made his point? Just before midnight, an unconfirmed report broke out of Niamey, Niger. A convoy of unknown origin passed through the capital's outskirts, escorted by military vehicles bearing no insignia. Satellite images confirmed movement, but its contents are unknown. Another report from Russian media claimed a deterrent asset had already been moved to an underground location somewhere along the Burkina-Mali border, possibly protected by Wagner-linked forces. In Washington, the White House press secretary warned of grave consequences if any threat against Israel materializes. A U.S. aircraft carrier group has been rerouted toward the West African coast, purely precautionary. Officials say but in Ouagadougou, the crowds are only growing. Flags of Palestine fly next to Burkina's red, green, gold banners. Giant murals of Traore appear across buildings with the words, "Our voice, our courage, our time." The world has never seen anything quite like this. A small African nation challenging a nuclear-backed power in defense of a people thousands of miles away. With the third day's morning only hours away, the global stage is set. Whatever happens next, whether a missile flies or not, the world has already changed. Burkina Faso is no longer invisible. Ibrahim Traoré is no longer a regional figure, and silence is no longer the norm. As the sun rose over the Sahel on the third day, global eyes were locked on one question: will Ibrahim Traoré keep his word? The ultimatum was clear. Israel had been given 48 hours to cease its military operations in Palestine, or face what Traoré ominously described as nuclear fire. Now that deadline had passed. 6 o'clock GMT, 7 o'clock GMT, 8 o'clock GMT. Each hour ticked by with eerie silence. Military analysts, Diplomats, journalists, even average citizens across continents refreshed their screens constantly, waiting for some confirmation. A launch, a strike, a reaction. Asterisk, and then, at 8:43 GMT, it happened. Asterisk, an object was launched from an undisclosed desert location in northern Burkina Faso. Eyewitnesses described a fiery trail arching into the sky. Satellite footage, later confirmed by AFRICOM and the European Space Agency, tracked a projectile climbing fast, eastward. Panic surged. Was this the missile Traore had promised? Asterisk, in Israel, air defense systems scrambled into full alert. Civil defense sirens rang across Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Haifa. Fighter jets were launched into the sky. Underground bunkers were opened. Panic spread. But then, something strange happened. At 9:06 GMT, the missile veered sharply, changing trajectory mid-air, before plunging into the Mediterranean Sea, hundreds of kilometers off the coast of Israel. There was no detonation, no explosion, no casualties. The world was stunned again, but for a different reason. Had Traore pulled back at the last second? Was it a calculated warning shot? Or was this all a well-crafted illusion, a non-nuclear missile designed to send a message, rather than start a war? Burkina Faso's military command issued a short statement minutes later. Greater than our voice has reached its destination. Our restraint is not weakness. We have demonstrated capability. Now, the world must choose peace or provocation. International reaction was swift. The United Nations Security Council called an emergency session. For the first time in decades, a landlocked West African country was the sole subject of global nuclear debate. Asterisk. Russia praised Burkina Faso for measured strength. Asterisk. China urged dialogue, emphasizing moral clarity over brute force. Asterisk. France condemned the act as irresponsible. Brinkmanship. Asterisk. The United States demanded immediate inspections of Burkina Faso's weapons facilities, but it was Israel's response that surprised many. At 12:15 GMT, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu appeared at a press conference in Jerusalem. His tone was unusually restrained. Asterisk. Greater than, we do not take threats lightly. We do not flinch, but we are not blind to signals. We are assessing the situation and will respond through appropriate channels. Asterisk. And by evening, reports from Gaza revealed a significant reduction in Israeli airstrikes. Some military units were observed pulling back from dense urban areas. No formal ceasefire was announced, but the shift was clear. Asterisk. Across the Arab and African world, Ibrahim Traoré was hailed as a strategic genius. Asterisk. He hadn't fired a nuclear warhead, but he had fired something more powerful: fear, respect, and a message that pierced the global silence. Asterisk. In Ouagadougou, hundreds of thousands flooded the streets, chanting, asterisk, we launched our courage, and they heard it. Asterisk. Meanwhile, unconfirmed. Sources suggest that several countries, including Iran, North Korea, and Venezuela, have opened back-channel communications with Burkina Faso. There are rumors of new military partnerships forming under the radar. Asterisk. The West, now forced to deal with a bold new actor, faces a dilemma: engage Traoré diplomatically or isolate him and risk further escalation. Asterisk. But perhaps the biggest shift happened in the minds of people across the global South. For decades, they've seen leaders bow, compromise, or remain silent. But Traoré just threw a stone at a global giant and wasn't crushed. The message was simple: greater than we may be small, but we are not afraid, and we will not be silent anymore. Asterisk. What comes next? No one knows for certain. Asterisk. But one thing is clear: the world has entered a new era, one in which power is no longer just about wealth or nuclear stockpiles, but about narrative, boldness, and timing. And in that new era, Ibrahim Traoré may have just become one of the most important voices on earth. 3 days have passed since Ibrahim Traoré fired a missile that plunged into the Mediterranean Sea, a weaponless, symbolic, but globally disruptive move. While the missile carried no warhead, its psychological payload detonated across continents. The world stood still. But behind that stillness, a storm was quietly gathering. In the early hours of the fourth day, strange reports emerged from northern Burkina Faso. Local villagers near the outskirts of Djibo described a massive explosion in the desert, one that shook the earth and lit the sky in the dead of night. The government of Burkina Faso at first claimed it was a fuel depot accident, but satellite imagery, obtained later by international journalists, revealed something else. A crater over 200 meters wide, scorched black earth, and the shattered remnants of a hardened underground structure. Whispers began circulating almost immediately. Was this Israel's response? While the Israeli government offered no comment, intelligence insiders leaked to several Western media outlets that a covert precision strike had been authorized directly by Mossad and coordinated with a Western ally, possibly France. The target? A rumored weapons development facility built with assistance from Wagner-aligned Russian engineers, allegedly housing prototypes or materials linked to Burkina Faso's deterrent capability. The message was clear. Your warning shot was noted. Here's ours. But what happened next defied expectations. Instead of condemning the strike or rallying for revenge, Ibrahim Traoré reappeared on national television that afternoon, calm, composed, and eerily deliberate. Greater than we have felt the hand that hides in shadows. It did not break us, it awakened us. Greater than, to those who thought a silent strike would silence us, you have only confirmed what we already knew. That when Africa speaks truth, missiles answer. He then declared a state of continental alert readiness, inviting military advisors from Mali, Niger, and Guinea to Ouagadougou for what he called joint security integration under the Sahel Defense Shield. The African continent watched closely. Just 2 weeks ago, many dismissed Traoré's rise as a nationalist experiment. Now, regional alliances were forming not through Western-backed forums, but through defiant, homegrown coalitions. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the United Nations remained fractured. Western powers defended Israel's right to prevent escalation. The African bloc demanded an independent investigation. Russia and China, smelling opportunity, supported calls for a probe while subtly offering protective partnerships to the new Sahel alliance. And then came the escalation no one predicted. Iran's supreme leader issued a rare statement, declaring, greater than we see the African resistance rising. We welcome any government that defends the innocent and resists tyranny. Let them know they are not alone. Shortly after, unmarked cargo planes were seen landing in Niamey and Bamako. Under heavy guard? Their cargo? Unknown. But suspicions are mounting that the Sahel 3, Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger are being armed not only with rhetoric, but with cutting-edge surveillance systems, long-range drones, and possibly ballistic deterrents. In Washington, the White House convened a classified emergency meeting. One leaked internal memo labeled the situation greater than Phase 1 of a geostrategic reversal. Africa no longer whispers. Meanwhile, civil unrest is brewing in France, where large African diaspora communities protested outside Parliament. accusing Macron's government of backing covert imperialist retaliation against Traore. And in Gaza, murals of Ibrahim Traoré have been painted on walls shattered by conflict. Children chant his name beside slogans reading, greater than he spoke when others watched. Back in Burkina Faso, preparations are underway for what is now being called the African People's Summit, hosted in Ouagadougou, inviting anti-imperialist leaders from Latin America, Asia, and Africa. The stated goal? Greater than to create a new world order based on justice, sovereignty, and courage, not military dominance. Israel, for its part, remains silent but watchful. Mossad has reportedly increased activity in West Africa. Western embassies have quietly advised non-essential personnel to evacuate from Burkina Faso and parts of Mali. But Traoré shows no signs of backing down. In fact, he ended his latest speech with words that have already become iconic. Greater than they hit us in the dark, but we rise in daylight. You've seen our warning. Next time, you'll feel our unity. The world is changing, not with full-scale wars or invasions, but with bold defiance, symbolic missiles, and alliances built in the margins. And at the center of this silent earthquake stands one man, one nation, and one message. Africa is done waiting. 1 week after the missile that never hit and the explosion that silenced no one, the eyes of the world turned to a place it had long ignored. Ouagadougou, the capital of Burkina Faso. There. In the heart of West Africa, surrounded by dirt roads, colonial-era buildings and banners painted with images of unity and resistance, something historic was unfolding. The African People's Summit. Over 40 countries were represented, not just from Africa, but from South America, Asia, and even Europe. This wasn't just a diplomatic gathering. It was a declaration of rebellion. Gone were the suits and rehearsed smiles of UN General Assemblies. Here, leaders arrived in military fatigues, cultural robes, and bold defiance. Flags of Mali, Venezuela, Palestine, Cuba, and Iran fluttered, alongside banners that read, greater than a new world begins where the old one breaks. At the center of it all, Ibrahim Traoré, once a captain, now something greater. Some called him a president, others a revolutionary. But to many in the crowd chanting his name, he was a symbol of resistance against global injustice. In the summit's opening address, Traoré didn't mince words. Greater than we were called poor. We were called primitive. But now we are calling the world, and we are not speaking in whispers. We are shouting in unity. Greater than, to those who still believe the world belongs to them, understand this. You no longer control the chessboard. The pawns have stopped moving. The kings are standing. The crowd erupted, but this wasn't just rhetoric. Behind the fiery speeches and handshakes, a new strategic alliance was signed, one that stunned the global elite. The Ouagadougou Pact formation of the Sahel Defense Command, a unified military council between Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and Guinea, pledging collective retaliation against any external aggression. Economic de-dollarization. Member nations agreed to begin trade using a new digital currency backed by gold and rare earth minerals. Strategic infrastructure. Corridor. A rail and energy corridor connecting the alliance with Algeria, opening routes for Chinese and Russian support. Recognition of Palestine, not just as a state, but as a co-founding member of the alliance. Establishment of the People's News Network (PNN), a satellite media outlet to rival Western narratives, funded by a media coalition led by Venezuela, Iran, and South Africa. Within 48 hours, the first repercussions hit. *1. The European Union imposed fresh sanctions on the Sahel bloc, freezing foreign reserves and cutting trade channels. *2. The United States designated the Sahel Defense Command as a potential destabilizing force, ordering the repositioning of drones and military assets in nearby regions, like Ghana and Djibouti. *3. France officially cut all diplomatic ties with Niger and Mali and ordered the withdrawal of remaining military advisors, but Traore and Surzer. His allies didn't flinch. Instead, they revealed the next move. We have lived under sanctions. Now we live beyond them. Just days later, Russia dispatched advanced air defense systems to protect key infrastructure in the alliance nations. Iranian drones were spotted in training exercises with Nigerian forces. China, while silent officially, quietly signed a resource development deal worth $12 billion, payable in the alliance's new digital currency, bypassing SWIFT entirely. In the streets of Ouagadougou, murals now covered entire city blocks. Traore's face was painted alongside that of Thomas Sankara, Che Guevara, Patrice Lumumba, and Hugo Chavez. The message was clear. Legacy is not what they write about you. It's what you dare to begin. Meanwhile, inside the West, panic grew behind closed doors. Intelligence agencies now labeled Traore as the ideological fuse of a new anti-Western axis. Some even suggested covert plans for regime change, though the alliance's military integration has made that riskier than ever. But the most shocking development came on the summit's final day, from a surprise video transmission. President Nicolas Maduro of Venezuela, flanked by Iranian and Bolivian delegates, proposed greater than let us form a global union of resistance, Africa, Asia, South America, one voice, one defense, one economy. This wasn't just about Palestine anymore. It wasn't about nuclear bluff or desert missile theatrics. This had become a revolutionary movement, and its beating heart was now West Africa. What happens next? Traore returned to the podium for one final statement. He didn't shout. He didn't raise a fist. He simply said, we are not looking to burn the world. We are lighting a torch for those who were kept in the dark. As the summit closed, global media struggled to reframe the story. Some still called him reckless. Others now called him a leader of a new non-aligned era. But millions, from refugee camps in Gaza to slums in Caracas to mines in the Congo, were calling him something else. The man who dared to roar and the world finally listened. After the historic African Peoples Summit and the signing of the Ouagadougou Pact, the world believed Ibrahim Traoré and his allies had made their move. What no one expected was what would happen next. In the early hours of a blistering desert morning, reports began flooding in from southern Gaza, but this time it wasn't about bombings or aid blockades. It was about troop movement, unexpected, swift, and untraceable. A convoy of unmarked military personnel, arriving through Egypt under the cover of humanitarian aid, had entered Gaza, but they weren't just doctors or medics. They were combat-ready special forces, clad in desert camo with no national flag, equipped with tactical gear, encrypted comms, and Russian-designed weapons. Unconfirmed leaks soon named them Burkina Faso's elite Red Viper unit, trained secretly in joint Sahel exercises with advisors from Iran and Syria. And this was no ordinary mission. It was the first ever foreign military presence from sub-Saharan Africa inside the Palestinian territories. Their goal? Asterisk protect civilian zones, evacuate families under fire, and block IDF ground advancement in Khan Yunis and Rafah. Asterisk within hours. Their presence became impossible to hide. Asterisk videos emerged online showing dark-skinned soldiers with Sahelian accents, commanding checkpoints, escorting women and children through shelled streets, and coordinating with Hamas-aligned brigades. Asterisk Burkina Faso's government confirmed it. Asterisk. We will not wait for history to forgive silence. We are now where the world has abandoned humanity, in Gaza. The reaction was volcanic. Israel declared it an act of international aggression and gave Burkina Faso and its allies 72 hours to withdraw their personnel or face full retaliation. Asterisk the United States called it a dangerous red line. Asterisk France labeled it the militarization of humanitarian aid. But in Bamako, Niamey, and Conakry, cheers erupted. Ibrahim Traoré addressed his nation again, flanked by his full cabinet and military council. Asterisk greater than, they said we would not act. Now we act. They said we would be crushed. We will not kneel. Gaza is not alone. Palestine is not alone. Africa is awake. Then came the next twist. Hezbollah, in a rare joint message with Houthi rebels and Iran's Revolutionary Guard, announced a formal alliance of coordination with the Sahel bloc for the liberation of oppressed peoples from neo-colonial forces. Asterisk suddenly, 3 continents were in sync: Middle East militias, African commandos, and Latin American supporters, all converging under a new anti-imperialist identity. Asterisk. But the counterpunch was already on its way. Asterisk. Within 48 hours, Israeli drones began pounding southern Gaza with renewed force. Several Red Viper field positions were hit. At least 12 Burkina soldiers were killed, the first known casualties of this undeclared African involvement. Asterisk Traore, in a solemn midnight speech, confirmed their deaths. Asterisk. They died not as soldiers of a small nation, but as guardians of a people abandoned by a world that forgot its soul. Asterisk Burkina Faso declared national mourning. But mourning quickly turned to mobilization. Asterisk Operation Desert Shield was officially launched, a joint African expeditionary mission with military teams from Mali, Niger, and Guinea now moving toward Egypt to assist with logistics and regional reinforcement. And then the game changed again. Russia, until now acting from the shadows, stepped into the light. Asterisk in a bold move. President Vladimir Putin authorized the deployment of naval intelligence vessels to the eastern Mediterranean under the guise of humanitarian monitoring. Asterisk unofficially. It was a message. Asterisk if Israel escalates, the balance may tilt. Asterisk meanwhile, in Tel Aviv, Israeli leadership faced pressure from hardliners demanding airstrikes inside Burkina Faso and total removal of foreign troops from Gaza. Asterisk. But here's where the old world met a new resistance. Asterisk for the first time, the UN General Assembly voted overwhelmingly to demand a ceasefire, and for the first time in years, the U.S. abstained, no longer able to diplomatically contain the fire Traore had started.